Hello! You let me down, Tom. You sure did. Ladies and gentlemen, and ladies, today I'm going to rebut an article that I found on the good old interwebs. As a matter of fact, this article comes to us from Tom's Guide, where one of their editors is stating that you should not, I repeat, should not buy an Xbox Series S.
Man, that fool be crazy.
You know, I like Tom. Tom's good. But Tom, you let me down today. Now, I have my own personal opinion as to why you should buy an Xbox Series S. That is, of course, if you're given the chance to. But let's see what Mr. Mellon from Tom's Guide has to say. He says, I reserved the console during the first wave of pre-orders, thinking it would be an excellent supplemental machine to sit alongside my PS5. But a few weeks from launch, I canceled the order. Aha, well that's the first issue right there. He seems to be a PlayStation fanboy. Very interesting. Well, in my book, he's already lost credibility. He then goes on to say that I ultimately decided not to part with my money, my dear, dear money, because I was, and still am, unconvinced of the entry-level console has a long-term future. Handsome Nation, I receive a ton of comments all the time talking about the Series S and asking to see if it's gonna hold its own into the future. I honestly and truly believe that Microsoft will not release a product, especially an Xbox product, that won't stand the test of time. I mean, this is Microsoft we're talking about. We're not talking about Google. There were times when Microsoft was on the brink of letting the Xbox brand fade into the sunset. But thankfully, the good Lord brought us Uncle Phil to give the Xbox brand the vision that it so desperately needed. Mr. Mellon then states, right now, the Xbox Series S makes for a nifty gaming machine, but it's already starting to show its weaknesses. Plus, as we get further into the console generation, these problems are only going to get worse. Wah, wah, wah. He's a downer. Well, Handsome Nation, I personally believe in the opposite. I mean, have you seen how Microsoft Flight Simulator runs on the Xbox Series S? Enough said. Next, Mr. Mellon is going to try to convince you to get the Series X because we know that this PS5 fanboy, well, he truly cares. The biggest discrepancy between the two machines is easily the GPU. The Xbox Series S sports an AMD RDNA2 4 teraflops 1.6 GHz, which is much less powerful than the beefy AMD RDNA2 12 teraflops 1.8 GHz found on the Xbox Series X. Yes. 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 We know that the Series X is the most powerful console ever made. But as the chart shows, the Series S maxes out at 1440p 120 frames per second, which means that it's not going to need as much RAM or GPU power to run games. Unlike the Series X, which maxes out at 8K 120 frames per second. I don't believe that Mr. Mellon, he quite understands why people buy the Series S in the first place. Some just want a casual console that has an amazing experience and they're not so worried about the graphical power. Example, the Switch. And mind you, the Switch is kind of just a glorified tablet. And what this PS5 fanboy fails to mention is, well, we have cloud gaming coming in the not so distant future. So with cloud gaming, all computing is done via an offline server. The measly, quote unquote, 4 teraflops, they won't matter when the complete cloud gaming service is available to everyone. Mr. Mellon then goes on to say, we've tested both consoles, extensively found that the Xbox Series X trumps the Xbox Series S in terms of performance in basically all areas. Yes. Ay. FIFA 22 players have been complaining that on the Xbox Series S, the game is a blurry mess. In fact, the resolution is so low that some people can't even make out the names and numbers of the back of the players' jerseys. Well, my first question is, who plays FIFA? Nah, just kidding. I kid. I know that soccer is the world's most popular sport, but I just can't get into it. F1 2021 is another game that had to make compromises on the Xbox Series S. The game targets 1080p on the Xbox Series S instead of the 4K targeted like on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. It also doesn't offer a 120Hz mode on the less powerful console. Correct, Mr. Melon, you got us there. Some games aren't going to look as good or run as smooth as they would on the Series X, but I think most consumers, especially gaming consumers, are aware of this and they're okay with the compromises. He then says, developers haven't been shy to comment on the issues that will arise when optimizing a game for the Xbox Series S. Last year, an employee ID Software, a team now actually owned by Microsoft, said the much lower amount of memory and the split memory banks with drastically slower speeds will be a major issue. They also noted that just lowering the resolution won't make up for the deficiencies. Now, let's just think about this for a second. I believe that as the Xbox consoles and services get into more and more households, developers will find a way to have their games optimized for the Series S. Or Xbox will create a nifty way to do that natively on the device like they did with FPS Boost. I find it to be extremely unlikely that games will only be available to buy on the Series X and not the Series S. The fact of the matter is that these issues are only going to get worse. Just doom and gloom on the Xbox Series S, man. Mr. Melon, please stop it. I believe it'll all get better in time. Leave a comment down below if you can name that reference. Right now, we're still in that crossover period between generations with most flagship games still being released for the Xbox One, as well as the new Xbox consoles. In the future, that won't be the case. Okay, so enough talking about Mr. Melon. This is what I believe. Xbox knows what's currently being developed for the Series X and S, probably for the next 3 to 5 years. Now call me crazy, but I highly doubt that when the Series S was in development, that they didn't foresee where the development of new games was going. I trust the brand, and I trust Uncle Phil to give us Xbox gamers exactly what we want, as the Xbox brand is community driven. Now I hope that this video ages well, as I plant my flag here to state that I still believe that the Xbox Series S is the best deal in gaming. But who do you think is right, Mr. Melon or yours truly? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, you might as well like this video, share this video, share the content of course, hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified every time I go live or when I post new content. Also, if you want to win one of these, an Xbox Series S, I'll put a link to the video in the cards above, as well as in the description down below. Thank you and have a good one.